Today's a historic day in Lenny Bros history because we're having our first guest. He's one of the best windsurfers on the planet, just an absolute staple at our home break. Hookipa has crushed jaws for years. He's just a legend. Kai, what do you think about our guest today?
Yeah, so our guest today, he's won the Aloha Classic, the windsurfing event that's going on right now. The finals are tomorrow, but this video won't come out till a little bit later, so you'll know who ends up doing really well. I'm still in it. Levi has won it before. His name is Levi Siver, and I think it's really fitting that we do a windsurfing episode because there's just too much to talk about. It's such a sick sport, and Levi is really he's an icon of wave sailing, and he's probably the #1 wild card going into this event. So pretty rad to have him on. He's kind of been like a big brother to me and Ridge in windsurfing, and super stoked to get into it with him because he's seen it all and he's made some of the best films in windsurfing and maybe even in water sports history. So let's do this.
I had a little love. Yeah, I had to cut a bill off. Yeah, but if we be real though.
Well, Levi, thanks for joining us. Our very first guest. It's a big moment.
Yeah.
Stoked to be here.
It's a big week too. We wanted to get you on because it's the 40th annual Aloha Classic, the biggest event in windsurfing. How's the event going for you so far? And are you feeling good about it? Everyone's saying you're one of the favorites alongside Kai here. So how's it going?
Yeah, I guess, I'm at the point where I'm doing it because I want to be part of it. I enjoy pushing myself. I don't want to really feel like I'm over the hill. I feel like the energy of this contest brings me to like my best sailing. So, and yeah, I've been enjoying myself. I don't compete very much. So it's like, I do have a little bit of that performance anxiety that you get when you haven't competed. I do like one contest a year. So I just need to realize, okay, that's just like your head tripping. But, Friday we had an unbelievable heat, Kai and I felt pretty good, and then I saw him, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going to be...
You got a higher heat score total than me, though, so I should be the one looking at all your clips. Was it a 9.1? You did 2 banging top turns and then a wave 360?
Yeah.
Was that a 9.5?
Yeah. No, it was I think a 9.1. I don't know, it's just I guess it just kind of fit the category of having 2 hits and a 3. The 3 wasn't super clean, but I guess just the combo of it. I think I would have rather had the points shuffled over where maybe my 2 vertical hits got a little bit more and that one adjusted a little bit. But, it's just, I guess it's hard to score. I saw your wave, that one big hit, and then you came out and then you had a nice finishing wrapping turn. And I thought that was probably, needed a higher score. Then I don't know what they gave that. But
yeah, I think I got my 2 highest scores were, I think I got 2 8s, and then the rest was 7 and a 6. And yeah, I don't compete in windsurfing probably as much as you compete in windsurfing, which is we just pray we get the wild card to the Aloha Classic every year, and I think probably stop competing in windsurfing the moment we stop getting our wild cards. I don't know though. I do it and then I get so into it and I'm like, I want to do it some more. And then the season ends here. Right. And it's like, oh gosh, hard to keep that motivation for an entire year for the event again. And a lot of the other windsurfing places aren't our forte, right? It's different conditions onshore, big jumps. Not that we don't want a big jump, but we don't want to fly halfway across the world to not hit the lip really.
Yeah, I think it's the level is so high out there now where, we're only doing it one time a year. It's kind of like a Pipe Masters scenario where there's a lot of good guys. But yeah, things have to flow your way. And I think it's kind of the pinnacle in the sport in terms of finishing here in Hawaii. I feel like that's what the WSL, that energy of just, crowning a champion here in Hawaiian soil. So I think it's just the legacy event for sure.
So coming into this event, who's we could be disruptors. You know, I know we've both made people cry in the past, and you kind of feel bad, but then it is competition. Last year I felt pretty bad because it was as close to Ricardo Campello getting to a world title, and he was against Brauzinho, and Brauzinho's like pretty hard to beat at Hookipa, but Ricardo's insane too, and I just had a little bit better heat than I can remember going, gosh, like, I just ruined his whole year.
You took out Ricardo?
Yeah, he had to beat me, and I took him out. I think it was like, who was in that heat? Yeah, it was me and him, I think, against each other, and I felt pretty bad, but I mean, gosh, if you can't beat me, then I don't know.
I think, I'm sure in his mind he looked at that draw and he was like kind of realizing if he made that heat, he could probably win the title because like you are a wild card that no one wants here. And
well, I think isn't that the point of a wild card though, right?
Yeah.
It's like you want to disrupt the natural flow of things.
Yeah. 100%. And yeah, I mean, the way you've been sailing, you know, I feel like there's some fairy dust being sprinkled on you right now. You have the magic. I've been watching you sail. I feel like you've been so close so many times, and I know that experience where it's like, yeah, I feel like it just has to almost like find you in a way where you're just sailing and it's almost like you're enjoying yourself. And that's what I saw from you Friday, is you just in that realm where you look so loose, you look so free in your mind, but like on another level too as well.
Oh, well, I thank you for that. For me, you know, I have no pressure. I haven't won it. So it's not like I mean, okay, maybe there's an internal pressure. You got to try to win it. But like, honestly, these guys spend all year training and doing all this stuff. And I basically windsurf for fun and to get clips here and there and sail with you out at Hookipa. And I was like, this is awesome. No one's out here. The waves are pretty good. My equipment feels insane. You know,
yeah.
We've worked
it
on
looks so good.
We worked with, you know, Jason Diffin at Goya Windsurfing to develop the sails. And for people who don't know, you know, windsurfing sails, all the equipment matters quite a bit. So the equipment you get on can like definitely elevate your performance. And
100%.
And it's not that everyone makes good equipment, but it's about finding the right equipment for your style and for how you ride. And once you can unlock that, then you can really perform. And I feel like last year I had these sails, you know, the Bonsai Surf, which is a very different sail to the world champion Brauzinho, who he has a very powerful backhand pressured loaded sail where all the power is up high, and that's so he can do his jumping in Germany and the onshore conditions. He can do double loops. But you know, both of us, I think, you know, go towards that Jason Polikow, who was a two-time world champion from the past, type of sail, which is a lot of twist at the top, forward draft, which is when all the power's by your front hand and your backhand's just completely light. Because when we get on the wave, we want to kill our power so that we can just surf the board. Yeah,
I think that's the wall-to-wall windsurfing where you're able to switch on and off the power and use the momentum of the wall of the wave and be able to lay into the rail of the board, but also be able to project like within a second to clear a section and do a big aerial. And I think that balance between, you know, like surfing or even like motocross, where you can click it on and just hit the gas and fly over a huge section. That's a good point you make. Describe windsurfing to just the layman, you know, like someone who doesn't windsurf at all, like, because you've said it before, and you know, back in the windsurfing movies, the ones that you produced with Poor Boys Productions, but you've always had a great description of what windsurfing is to someone who's never even done it. For me, it feels like motocross surfing, because like we were talking about how you can depower the sail, you feel the rail completely, you feel the bounds of gravity, meaning, you know, you're connected, but then you could defy it with the lift of the wind in the right time. So there's no limit to how huge you can go. You can go almost like to the point where, you know, I mean, you watch Ricardo sail and how hard he pushes that limit, where it's like full pin. It's like kind of like the motocross guys, like the Nitro Circus guys. If you're like gassing it.
Is he going like 60 feet and just what do you say each rotation, right? You're probably going like 50 miles an hour of rotational speed.
I mean, I feel like for me and you, it's like we're always trying to refine and just package our style and have that surfing influence. But if we really just wanted to go psycho and like set really deep from the lip and just project into just crazy rotations, we could make that decision if we wanted to.
Yeah.
So windsurfing has that element.
I mean, you've had gnarly windsurfing injuries. I have too. I'd say probably one of my worst was jumping with you and Brauzinho for my film Paradigm Lost. We were doing the windsurfing segment, and we were at the outer reef, so we were like a mile out to sea, basically. And that was like, I was looking forward to that because that was like that motocross jumping, and Brauzinho was doing the double fronts, and then you were doing these huge one-handed back loops and giant stalled forward flips. And I remember just hitting a ramp a little late, and the strap jammed against my high ankle ligaments, and it tore all of them. And thank God for windsurfing, I could kind of sit on my butt, and I sailed myself in, and we did a closing shot on the grass where we had to get like a face shot of us three together. Yeah. And my ankle was a complete balloon. I don't know if you remember that.
I do. Well, you did really well holding your pain together, because I don't remember you being that injured, but I can't believe you destroyed your ligaments on that. That's wild.
That took a while to recover. But what was your worst?
Yeah, it was really weird because I kind of came unscathed. Like my older brother, growing up with him and watching how crazy he is, he had so many injuries that it kind of like made me a little bit more calculated in my approach, because I just said, wow, that's pretty intense. But there's a double edge to that, because if you haven't had a big injury, that's like you kind of feel that eventually it's going to come. And I knew that my injury was coming. It was like this really weird feeling, because ever since I was like a teenage kid windsurfing, I've never really had a break from windsurfing. I've never taken time off from it. And when my injury came, it was almost like, in a sense, like it was meant to be, because it kind of removed me from windsurfing. It gave me like a fresh perspective. And it was a pretty bad injury, actually. I was doing a one-handed tweaked aerial, which
off the lip.
Bang. Yeah. So you go up and you tweak the board out, which there's a lot of elements going on with that.
That's really challenging for people that don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of like, like we said, like in motocross, you're doing a crazy rotation, and then you're like taking hands and feet off of the bike. So that's kind of like, it looks super stylish if you could do it right, but there is like an element of danger in it. And I had a couple crashes before that happened, but I just basically felt like a stone. Like I got in this weird dead weight where I was really high, tweaked out, and I knew I was going to land on the gear, and I knew I was going to break my ribs. So I thought maybe it's better I just hold on to the boom with my hand. And I landed so hard that my hand just spiral fractured. So they call it like a boxer break. And it's like boxers get it because they punch people in the face so hard or whatever, and it just spiral fractures the bones right here. So
how long did that take to recover?
I still have 6 screws in this hand, so it's like metacarpal. So there's 3 right there, 3 right there. Because it was really just bones, and I had a really good surgeon. She put me back together really well, and I was on the water in like 9 weeks.
That's pretty fast.
Yeah, 9 weeks I was. And and all the best stuff came to me competitively after that injury. Like my, the Aloha win, and just, some other wins I had on the IWT tour. It was just really weird. And it just puts things in perspective. Yeah. It's a phenomenon. Like when I see people get injured, like Mark Perret, he came back from an injury and he won Zilt.
Yeah, he blew his ankle out.
Yeah, he blew his ankle out. And this is like happens a lot.
He's a title contender this year, right? It's him, Brauzinho, Morgan now? Antoine?
That's a really good. I don't know what I think Philip Koster's in there too.
He lost already, unfortunately for him.
Yeah, he lost, yeah. Yeah, it's a tight race, so. Yeah, windsurfing, to me, it seems, and just from my experience in the sport, it's like so unforgiving. I remember there was a time I was trying to learn back loops, and I
couldn't grasp the concept of like, you have to sheet in super hard when you're upside down to like stall the rotation.
Yeah.
Every time I'd like sheet out too much, and I would just slam so hard with the board flat, and every time I thought I was going to break my legs. And after trying it for like a couple of weeks, I was like, this board's kind of too gnarly. Like,
Dude,
it's so unforgiving.
Windsurfing is the best because it's like, it's one of those sports on any given day. I guess, other sports could be kind of like this, but windsurfing, you always know you're not fully going as big as you could. Like, you could always go a little bit bigger. Like, I always feel that way.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just holding back too much.
No, I feel kind of like an eternal kook with windsurfing. Even though I've spent so much time doing it, I always see stuff that I don't like in my sailing. And there are those moments where you're like, wow, I put that together in a nice way, but you're like, I wish I would have just pushed a little harder off the top. Or it's so addicting because I think it's so hard. You can't control it. You're dealing with, we all know how hard surfing is and how unpredictable waves are, and every wave is different. Now throw the wind on top of that element, and you have gear. And it's just like, the idea, you can't even control it. It's got to just come out naturally.
I feel like that, but at the same time, I think windsurfing, when you have the right equipment, it does a lot of the work for you. Like my current setup with the, Goya Bonsai surf sail, and then, the 100% mast, and then the board that I shaped and then Quattro built, like that, all that combo that was like tuned to me. And it took me a while to kind of figure that out, but it seems like now when I go out, I kind of don't have to think as much. Like I don't have to try to fight the wind as much. It does a lot of the heavy lifting. And I think that's why, like, when people do get into windsurfing, it's like, you kind of got to be into fine tuning your gear if you really want to, like, either get good or just have the most comfortable experience. But if you talk to any sailor across any boat sport or any type of wind sport, that's the case. Like all the sailors on like their, either if it's just a one person thing or all the way up to the America's Cup, or the J series, whatever, they're constantly tuning those things. That's like part of the experience.
Yeah, that's a well put. And I think with those guys, they know that they're not as good as what they can be, and maybe they're not as fast as what they think they could be, but they know that the element is to, get is technology and to be able to push the equipment, because you can tap out on your level in a sense where it's easy to get in a rut, especially when you've done something for so long. Sometimes it's hard to go to that next step, that next level in your performance. But when you do have, like you're saying, your equipment, like how your equipment was so dialed for you Friday, you could see that it was like feeding you energy. Like you were just like, after you finish the wave, you're like, busting out like freestyle moves and, at the end of the wave, because you're just like on fire. And I think that was, coming from that feedback from the gear too.
Oh, totally. No, I think in the right conditions, there's probably no sport more fun on earth than windsurfing, at least in the surf world, because here you have like, you can sail out and jump and do all these tricks and go super fast. There's no wave that's too big to windsurf. I think it might be, if you had to ride in the perfect conditions, the largest wave ever ridden, windsurfing, you have the control of the sail, you have the control of the board. You could go, windsurfers do go 54 knots, so over 60 miles per hour. Yeah. So you can handle the speed, but in that sense, you can get the last wave of the set if you rode the first wave of that set. And you can do these laps, and there's no lip too big to hit. It's just you have the courage to do it. There's no trick too big to get inverted. Like what's called a goiter is like an upside down kind of corked 360. It's when you lay the sail down onto the whitewater and you rotate your body around it, and then the sail comes flying up because if you have all this inertia and speed. So like when you're able to like access that, it just seems endless. But I think we should talk about the difference between our Aloha Classic now and what the Aloha Classic was when you first started, because windsurfing has never been better. The level's never been higher. The people involved are probably some of the nicest people on the face of the planet. You could beat somebody, ruin the world title hopes, and then go and hang out with them, and they're great people, and everyone's just fantastic. But it was a little bit different back in the day because it was the biggest, fastest growing water sport on the face of the planet. And, you know, you had every news channel from Europe and then even America, which we get no coverage in the US anymore.
Yeah.
But it was a scene, and Ridge and I vaguely remember it, but you were there, and you were probably one of the youngest wild cards ever.
Yeah, when I showed up, I think it was like 92. I actually showed up because I wasn't born in Maui. I was born on the mainland in the gorge. Well, we moved around a bit on the mainland, but that's where we got into windsurfing, the Columbia River Gorge. So we had the VHS tapes of, you know, the Jason Polacco film, and we were in the know of like what Maui was about. So when we actually moved over as a family, we arrived during the Aloha Classic. I think it was like the 1992 Aloha Classic. And I remember going down the evening. I think it was like they just finished competing one of the days. And I just remember seeing like Polacco sail, Robbie Nash's sail. That's back when they would just keep everything rigged on the beach overnight. They had like security and everything. And I was just blown away. I was just like,
Jeez.
Yeah, I was just tripping out. Like the energy. I mean, I was, 12 years old, but it felt so massive, and it was so like nothing I've ever seen before, because at that time there was, the cigarette companies, there was no law against the cigarette companies marketing through sports. And windsurfing has a really pure image because it has, it's the wind and the ocean, but we have that visibility with the sail, and they saw a perfect opportunity
big billboard, yeah.
as a billboard. So they were pumping millions and millions of dollars into the sport.
Crazy.
So the sport, there are like $250,000, $300,000 prize money events.
Whoa.
Like all the time in windsurfing. And, people were like making lots of money in the sport. And even if you were a kind of a mid-level rider, you could make a full living, no problem. And if you were a top tier rider,
You're buying mansions and cars.
Yeah.
That's
it was
crazy.
like legit. So yeah, I think that added to sort of the vibe of the athletes, because in the 80s and the 90s, I don't know, it was just, I think that the characters were a lot more combative. I think they, the way
there was a lot on the line though.
Yeah, maybe that's what it was.
There was how many events? There was probably like 24 events for wave sailing, and then I don't know if that's true or not. It just seemed like there was a lot. I remember watching all the VHS tapes of the tours, and it was like nonstop. These guys would be gone all year, but they'd be killing it and making these insane careers. And Robbie Naish always had the biggest trucks, and the biggest cars, and Polacco was just like killing it because he also had his company JP, and Robbie obviously made his own company too. But the difference might have been like, what was it like just getting to Hookipa, going past Pavilions in order to get
to what I want to know.
The point, because for people who don't know, there was a very
You ever seen the movie Lost Boys?
Yeah.
That's pretty much how Pavilions, the vibe felt. It was like, kind of taking that movie but making it more of like a surf gang.
Yeah, and for people that don't know, to get to the wind, so there's two sides of Hookipa. There's Pavilions, and then there's the point. They windsurf at the point, but to get to the point, you have to go around and drive through, and you have to drive right past Pavilions. And I think, Levi, you can attest to this, but back in your day, I think even more so, it's like the core of surfing on Maui is right there. And they didn't take too kindly to windsurfers back in the day, did they?
It was pre-social media, so no one was videoing anything. So there was no lifeguards. It was just basically a free-for-all. And things got settled on their own terms. And I think, it's just, there's a lot going on that one beach. Yeah, you had to drive through. It's a one-way beach. So, you'd start driving down and you'd see like 2 or 3 trucks with the gnarliest like crew sitting on the truck, like a whole group of them, and just like staring. It
was like a movie, huh?
Yeah, you're getting the gnarliest stare downs. And it's like, mostly, like I knew like a lot of guys that I was friends with. So I slipped through the cracks, so to speak. I always I pay respect, you get respect. But, some people did have some problems where they're always trying to maybe come in through the other way. So they'd back
The wrong way.
They'd back the car
gosh,
in
yeah.
to the point
no.
to
Our friend Chochala did that.
to try to
do
just
that, Rich?
avoid.
Yeah, he was saying he used to get so pestered, like they would just be so hard on him because, like, you know, Josh, like he's probably saying some crazy stuff driving
Yeah,
through
our
there or
friend
something.
Josh from Texas, he just
Yeah.
he attracts it. He's a great guy, but he totally probably was like, you know, he's not one to not chirp back if someone's chirping at him. You know, he's
But
gonna speak his mind.
Apparently, when he was a teenager, it got so bad that he'd drive to the end and back his car down because he was too
You know
rattled
what
to
I
drive
love about
through Pavilions.
windsurfers is most people would just be like, I'm just not gonna go to that spot. Not windsurfers.
No,
they'll
we're
like
great.
park
We'll
across
die.
the street.
We'll die to go get a session.
Gotta go to Hookipa, you know, no matter what, even if it
Yeah.
means like getting rocks thrown at me, getting beat up. And
Yeah.
I remember as a kid watching this movie. It was called Ballin' on a Budget. It was a surf flick from Maui, and it had like North Shore Oahu and stuff. I think it was like a Vulcan film or something.
Yeah.
And there was a part. The opening I think was like a windsurfer breaking his mast and the current brings you upwind to the top of the bay,
Yeah.
and him just getting pelted with rocks.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Yeah.
I kind of was at the tail end of that, you know, like not
Yeah.
really, but like the vibe was gnarly. When I got my driver's license, I was properly like nervous every time I drove through there because I just didn't want any confrontation or anything. And it's just crazy how times change.
What do you think it was about that era that created that sort of animosity? Because nowadays I feel like, you know, at least a lot of like the surfers, like so many of my friends, Kai and I, like we're the product of windsurfers that came here in the 80s. Like so many of the best surfers here are literally kids of windsurfers. But do you think it was just sort of like they saw these guys rolling down there in their like super nice trucks making all this money, or Europeans coming in, and you have all these really talented surfers
It was the
that
double
maybe weren't making
parking,
anything.
probably. The European
yeah,
double
probably was.
parking in Paia or something.
I think it was a blend. I think there's two factors going on. I feel like the surfing core of Hookipa, to have a lot of influx of Europeans culturally, it's just a lot different. And they weren't necessarily like, they would call windsurfing surfing. So there's a little bit of a disconnect on the understanding of what core surfing is. But a lot of windsurfers are diehard surfers. But I feel like the image of the sport kind of was stuck in the 80s. So it had this kind of perception that was, over time, people started to realize, hey, these guys surf. These guys are, you know, connect. They're like Kai's a great ambassador for that, you know, connect to the ocean and do it all. And you just, over time, you get that respect. But at that time, it was a lot coming in at one time, just like the whole scene of windsurfing. And then, you know, even surfing doesn't have that counterculture anymore. Like what was at Pavilions, you know,
No, yeah.
I think also too in windsurfing, you can catch a million waves a minute on a good day. And, you know, if a surfer's out there and people are like excited for the competition and you're warming up and you're just doing laps and laps, and windsurfing can be pretty intimidating too, because the equipment, you're so powerful, you know, you have all this wind and you have all this momentum and there's this big gear. And if you're not a windsurfer, you can't really predict where the person's going to go, because windsurfing, you're really light on the water and the nose is constantly moving. And I think that kind of like a bad experience here and there could totally have like turned people against windsurfing.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't want to be out there surfing and swimming when everybody's windsurfing on a super windy day. Just, you know, it's just, I'd rather go earlier or later on my surf sesh. But I mean, like Ridge, you've gone out there because you windsurf too, so you can predict what people are going to do.
For sure, yeah.
So
I think nowadays it's found like a really a good balance, you know, where I think the surfers kind of know, like, to be honest, like surfing the point when it's really good for windsurfing is pretty not, like, regardless, isn't that great of an experience. It's just so windblown and terrible. And it's kind of like an understanding nowadays, because windsurfing's been established for so long. It's like, okay, 11 o'clock comes around, windsurfers are going out, you know, it's just kind of how it's always been. And it doesn't seem like there's the same sort of like surfing versus windsurfing thing that there used to be. And you see so many of the talented kids coming up, like, you know, Otis Buckingham, Cash, all these younger guys that are growing up, sort of just not really seeing any divide. It's like you're just in the ocean and it's windy and it's good for windsurfing, so you're just going to go
You
windsurfing
surf in the
versus,
morning, you windsurf when
you
the
just
wind
do
comes
everything.
up.
Yeah, I'm happy to see it how it is now. It wasn't really. It was kind of felt toxic back when I was younger, and I think now everybody finds their way in the ocean, enjoys it, and yeah, we all love to surf and windsurf, and I think it's just respect, really. If there's like barely any wind and you're out there trying to windsurf and there's a lineup of surfers and it's good surfing, it's like it's not a good time to go out. But what makes Maui, it is the mecca of windsurfing, where the shape of the island, this place is a wind machine. So when they started windsurfing it in the early 80s, there wasn't much people surfing it at all, really.
No one surfed Hookipa, right?
Yeah.
When Mike Waltz and Matt Schweitzer and those guys went out, like it was just like a windy, blown, not even a beach park, was it? It was just like
everybody's going to Honolulu. They were just going to like the good waves. They're coming over from Oahu, and people would surf it, but it was like very handful. It wasn't.
Yeah, it was like surfing for an hour in the morning.
On those old like single fins too, it probably wasn't very fun out there.
And leashless back in the day.
Yeah,
so you'd lose your board. It's on the rocks every time.
Rocks.
Oh wait, that's a perfect segue. Let's talk about the rocks, because guys get smoked on the rocks. I've been smoked on the rocks. There's no escaping being smoked on the rocks. But just think about all this awesome equipment just gets absolutely shredded, and it's almost added to the lore of Hookipa. I think it's why the Aloha Classic became so famous back in the day, because it was literally like, back then, life or death. Guys would go out when it'd be really big and you'd be in a competition, world title on the line, and you'd have one bad mistake, your gear would get broken and you'd get obliterated onto the rocks.
Yeah, and it's one thing if it was like kind of hidden, but it's like literally the stage of the entire bluff is looking at you getting destroyed.
Yeah, you just have a full peanut gallery, right?
You're just getting annihilated. You're trying to look as graceful as possible, but
what's the worst thing? Who's gotten the most destroyed on there?
Oh, Ricardo.
Didn't even have to think about that one.
So,
he pays rent. He pays rent on the rocks.
Ricardo deserves the best wave ever out there, because I think one time I saw him. The reason why he goes on the rocks is not because he's not good. He's one of the best out at Hookipa. But he goes so big that he absolutely will destroy himself. Gear will go on the rocks, and he'll probably do 3 trips to the rocks in one day on a good day.
He doesn't know how to say no, and that's kind of like my brother was the same way, and that's what makes him brilliant and spectacular to watch. Where they're just like, really, you're really gonna go for that section? You're like a little late.
The biggest closeout, right? Yeah. Closing out the bay. It's 30-foot faced wave. They're going 25, 30 miles an hour down the line on a windsurf, and they're like, I'm gonna do a double taka, which is essentially a 720. And then they land on top of the whitewater and break their legs in a heat.
Yeah.
No, before the heat starts.
Yeah, before
the heat starts, they'll just go send one, because the section's there.
I admire it, because I would like to pull a little bit more of that. I can be almost overcalculated.
They're really clutch when it works out.
Yeah, it's. I mean, everybody's like, "Oh, that was the stupidest move you could have ever made." If you don't make it, but if you make it, you're like, "Brilliant."
Yeah, it's just like Da Vinci.
There was one time we were out at Jaws, and it was like a windy day, so all the windsurfers were out, and I was just cruising the channel on a ski, and Ricardo was out there, and every time he would pass by, I'm like, Ricardo, do a push loop off the lip. Every time, over and over again, I was just like trying to get him all psyched. He's like, no, I'm not going to do it. Finally, he goes and tries it and just gets freaking swatted. He goes upside down, and like the draft hits him, and he just had a full yard sail. It was pretty classic.
Who tries a triple loop windsurfing? I mean, really? I mean,
he did 20 years ago and almost broke his neck. Roll the cliff, Ridge.
That's the plan. Have you ever tried a triple Levi?
I don't even know like how your mind could process all that gear, that speed, and that force.
Each rotation you like probably gain 10 miles an hour. It's like centrifugal force. Like, how many G's are they pulling? Like 6 G's as they face plant the water. The worst slams of my entire career, big wave or not, for sure windsurfing, because you know how it is. If you land a front loop under rotated, even a double, or a back rotation, that's like we call a push loop, which is basically a perfect gainer. When you land, the water shoots up and hits you, where.
It's like the surface tension. It's
oh
like
my
concrete.
gosh. I've hit my back and you just almost lose consciousness. And I'm like, it's wild. Because you're doing 50-mile-an-hour rotation to your back. So the worst slam you could possibly imagine. And then you're drowning under your sail.
It's amazing that he's been able to ride like that and, escape being, seriously injured for all these years. I mean, I think it's a testament to how good he is.
He does deserve, I think, a wave world title. He's won 3 freestyle world titles back in the day. And he just recently had his first child. And I think when you were talking about he's never had a break from the tour. His life has been on the tour since he was probably 15 or 16. So he's done the tour every single year since then. Now that he's had his daughter and, maybe it's the break he needed because he's gotten so close to the world title and he's completely worthy of it. And I'm sure he questions if he'd ever win it. But at the end of the day, he maybe needed to take 1 step back to take 2 steps forward.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I used to listen to performance coaches and they're saying that, mental toughness, a lot of it comes from having the strong relationships in your life and kind of scaling the importance of what competition is in terms of what really matters. And sometimes when you have a deeper thing in your life, like a family or a kid, it can put it in perspective in the sense that sometimes if you're so consumed with something and you want it so bad, it's almost like it has to just allow to happen in the sense that your performance has to come out in a natural way and you have to almost let it go. Like I know Kelly Slater said that in his
letting go
because it's like you can't control any of it. And he's a prime example. He's so close. He's so many times. It's like, what's going on? Why?
Second, I don't know, 6 or 7 times or something.
And that must be really hard to cope with. But I mean, regardless, he's had an amazing career. I mean,
he's won. He's world champion in other disciplines, not wave, but freestyle. He's considered probably one of the greatest of all time.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he is a freak of nature. There's no question about it.
How crazy is what the freestyle guys are doing now? I go on binges sometimes where I look it up and I'm like, it doesn't even compute in my head what even is happening. They go in the air and they're facing the wrong way and then they just spin around a bunch of times and just ride out.
It's kind of
on such a crazy level.
How many rotations they can do off of flat water, all this pop they get.
I can't even comprehend it. I watch it now and I can't even understand it. It's so complex because you have all the rotations and the spinning, but like what Kai was saying, they're reversing the wind. So now, they're using the reverse aspect of the sail where they're spinning off of spins into spins. And it's
too technical. If you're not into it, you're just like, what did I just watch? It's like watching
you almost have
big
to
air snowboarding. It's like, okay, they spun an extra 3 times. I can't even tell.
Yeah, it's almost like it spun itself out.
It spun itself out. I actually when it's so sick because in Europe, what I love about Europe and what I love about actually Northern Europe, because they don't have surf. And so that's a little history here. They would call windsurfing surfing because that was their form of surfing, and they idolized Hawaii. Most of them would never make it to Hawaii, but they wanted to recreate that there. And they'd have these events on lakes in Germany or in the Swiss Alps and Austria and all these crazy places that are beautiful in their own way, but a lot of times there would be no wind for these windsurfing events and no waves. So they get behind these boats and they get towed in at 40 miles an hour to another boat that creates a wake, and then they launch 20 feet in the air and they spin and they use the apparent wind that is created from the speed moving forward on their sail, and the crowd goes nuts on the beach. And it's it's just so rad because they literally will make wind out of nothing.
It's crazy.
That eventually turned to the I mean, that is the indoor
Yeah.
windsurfing in
I was just
Paris,
about
for
to say.
example.
Yeah. It's,
Did you ever go to one of those, Levi?
no, I
looks
refused to participate in that.
Too core, yeah.
Why?
You were too wave core.
No, it's not that. It's just like I just love my body too much. I don't want to get injured on a ramp that was probably built like a day before the event. And
I have to say, I have been to one of those events once.
Yeah.
And I kind of wish they did it again so I could do it again, because I feel like I'd be better now that I've been there once or whatever. But it's the wildest thing. It's the only time in any sport I've felt like maybe not a rock star, but someone that like, you know, would hop on stage in front of thousands and thousands of people. And they have all these fans. They have like 20 fans lined up in a row.
Oh, yeah.
And they're blowing like 30 miles an hour. And it's so gusty. And they have this pool that's only waist deep. So you'll break the nose of your board off if you land some of your tricks nose first. You'll break yourself. The most legendary lord of the pool, besides Robbie Naish, was Roberto Terrore, who was, I would say, the sports madman. He was like the daredevil. He was the evil Knievel. He'd purposely go as fast as he could, hit this wooden ramp that had a slot for your fin. So if you miss the slot with your fin, it'll catch and you'll face plant the ramp, probably break your ribs, your arms, and maybe your neck, tomahawk off into a shallow pool. They can't do it in America because it'd be illegal, but he'd go as fast as he could, launch himself out of the pool, do a front loop, front flip, land on his butt in concrete. The crowd would go wild, blow his fin out. I mean, he used to sail out the corner of the pool through like the exit of the stadium and just
jumped out.
disappear.
He was jumping out of the pool into the bleachers.
Yeah, into the crowd. Like, imagine a guy on a windsurfer going 25 miles an hour at you off
Like
a ramp and just trying to like hit you in the forehead. Like, pretty core. I back it.
There's no way of having that going good. Like, there's no exit plan on that.
A quick, talk about Roberto Terrore. He was one of the first to really do the double front loop because he was literally fearless. For the longest time, he'd go out to Jaws and windsurf in board shorts when guys had like all the safety measures, and he was just a beast from New Caledonia, spent a lot of time in Tahiti, just an absolute legend, of course. But one of the craziest stories is he windsurfed across the Atlantic Ocean, and one of our good friends, Jace Pontebianco, who helped make the Windsurfing movie, was there too. But they had like what was a big military ship that escorted him across like 4,000 miles of water. And that's not even the craziest part. It was some ship where it was like, I think 250 feet tall. It was just a massive ship. And they finished, right, over, I think it was in France or somewhere. And he thought it was a great idea to jump off the top of it.
Oh, yeah.
And he
I remember
jumped,
that.
and I think he had like internal bleeding and broke his back because he jumped like 200 feet.
Yeah, I think it was like, it was something. It was like suicide height. And yeah, he's another
like almost
head case.
like he was just like, maybe it wasn't 200 feet. It was like really high though. It was like 150 feet or something.
Fearless. He's fearless. Well, actually, on the double loop, to get it, my history might be a little bit tweaked on this, but I think it was the race to really complete one was Robbie Seeger was really trying him, and Francisco Goya, and I know Roberto Terrore maybe came right around the time, but I'm pretty sure.
I think Robert was just hucking them, right?
I think Francisco was the one to land them. Like he was
technically sound.
Technically, I think he might have been the first one to properly land a double. And then Robert, he was the one that was the first one doing delayed doubles. I mean, stall doubles. So that was going down like early 2000s. So he did that way before the guys that are doing it now.
But I felt like Robert was always like, he wasn't out there training like Francisco or Robbie Seeger probably. I feel like he was maybe like doing something else, and he was just such a showman that put him in front of 10,000 people on a beach in Germany with 40 knot onshore winds, and he was just going to send it every time.
And that thinking was about it, that's like Ricardo. They're kind of the same.
Well, there needs to be someone in windsurfing, and I think now that person, I think for a while it was always Ricardo, but then it was Bujma, because you remember he attempted the triple loop, and it just so happened that another world champion windsurfer, Victor Fernandez, had a GoPro strapped to his head, and he literally went.
yeah.
He was doing. So Bujma is this guy from Morocco, the nicest Moroccan, and he when he showed up on the scene, he was absolutely insane. Like, who is this guy? It was like, you know, this company Starboard. Where did he find him? And like, this guy was he was hitting lips that no one would want to hit, right? And then for a while, he was like, he's gonna do a triple loop, and he's going at Hookipa. For a little context, offshore winds is really challenging for those types of tricks because it messes your access up when you hit the lip, because you go off of it not perfectly straight. You're not going into the wind to kind of get lift. You're kind of like falling away from it. And Victor captured this video of him doing a triple loop and face planting onto his sail. And literally he would have died if Victor wasn't right there, jumped off, brought him into shore. And he was like in the hospital for like a week or two or something crazy.
Yeah, he basically died because he got knocked out. And I think, you know, they didn't have to resuscitate him, but he was, I think he
break
might
his
have
neck or something.
No, I think he swallowed some water and he was out cold, and they were able to get him on the board. And I don't know. I don't think
maybe
his
the
heart.
Lifeguards got.
Yeah,
to
I don't
him
think his
after?
heart stopped, but I think he definitely was like knocked out cold, and he was moments away
He must have hit the water going like 60 or 70 miles an hour, though.
Yeah, I think that changed him a little bit, though. I think that was one of the that was a close call.
I would say the next guy up after that for crazy windsurfing is probably our buddy Antoine from Guadeloupe.
Oh yeah.
T2. He's just like, the guy's such a hammer, like trying stuff that would just break anyone else's legs. And I mean, God forbid he gets hurt, but he's like on beach. He's like, oh no, I'm so scared. Oh no. And then he goes out there and he's like hitting like a 40-foot wave and just trying to like do a double backflip. And which in windsurfing is really hard because you get wrapped up in your gear and you end up just losing control and slamming super hard. No one's actually successfully made it, and he might be one of those guys that will pull it off because it doesn't seem like it's deterred him at all.
No, I mean, always they want to push the level of sport and take it to a place it's never been to, and to do that, it's going to be moves like that are going to do it.
Those moves exist in a place that's probably the polar opposite to Maui, a place called Pozo, Gran Canaria, in the Canary Islands. Tell us about the rolling rocks and the 60-mile-an-hour winds, Levi.
Yeah, well, I think the two kind of pinnacle locations in windsurfing, I mean, there are other spots, but in terms of like competitively, would be Maui for wave riding, Hookipa, and then Pozo in the Canary Islands for jumping and for, you know, just progressive rotations. And they're just the two opposites. But to be a world champ, you have to prove yourself. You have to do well in both of those. So if you can do well at Hookipa and Pozo, you are the complete package.
There's only a few guys that really can do it well.
You can win a world title. Because out of those two events, you can do well in all the other events.
So imagine in windsurfing, unlike surfing, to be a world champion, you have to be equally as good both goofy foot and regular foot. You have to be able to sail starboard tack, port tack. Here on Maui, it's what we call starboard tack, so it's regular footed, right or left foot forward wave sailing. And when you jump, you know, I grew up jumping, you grew up jumping, basically goofy foot, even though we're basically regular foot surfers. And so you get really used to jumping and doing all these things, basically switch stance. And then you have to go all the way to Pozo. Pozo's port tack, so you're actually jumping regular foot and you're wave riding goofy foot. But Pozo, what's so unique about Pozo is it's 60-mile-an-hour winds, and it's so windy that these little rocks, these cobblestones, start rolling down the beach. Once they gain momentum, they'll keep going. And I remember showing up there and going, whoa, this place is absolutely out of control. And guys are flying 50, 60 feet in the air and doing the most perfect rotations. I mean, you watch Philip Koster there. He's the king of Pozo, basically. And there's a lot of also insane local talent. And Ricardo Campello has always been kind of like right there as one of the best. Victor Fernandez, the world champion I was describing with Bujma. But then, you know, those guys being able to translate that type of sailing over here. There's only a few guys that have done really well. And I'd say right now, the best all-around sailor in the world has to be probably our friend Marcilio Brown Brazinho. Is he 3-time world champion now, wave sailing?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah, I think This Well, I
He
know
might
he
be
won.
4 this year. We don't know.
Well,
It's
he
still
won a
up in the air.
freestyle. He won a freestyle title.
So
So
2 wave then.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so Brasinho is equally, I would say, good on either tacks. He'd probably tell you he's better, starboard tack, but you can't tell the difference, to be honest.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. He's the full package. He's cracked the code on windsurfing.
He's so funny, though, because when you talk to world champions, like, world champions can be humble, but it does take, like, you have to have a sort of, like, I'm going to kick everyone's butt mentality. And, back in the day, it was maybe more that, like when Robbie Naish was going against Bjorn Dunkerbeck. I mean, I was watching some of the interviews. I'm like, gosh, these guys were kind of gnarly, like
Yeah,
I wouldn't say some of these things on now you get canceled and judged for stuff. It's not like they were saying cancelable things, but they were going for each other's throats being like, I didn't have a good session, but he didn't either. And, it was just like, but it was good.
Yeah.
It was great viewing, of course.
Yeah,
but they had that champion's mind. And what's baffles me on Brasinho is he's just like, oh, I just want to go out there and have fun. And, whatever happens, he's just so nonchalant. And he gets in a heat. And I think because he's so good, he doesn't have to actually be that competitive because he just has to sail. And if he just sails good, he's just going to win.
I think he's in the way that I think I've had that too, where you can be your own worst enemy in the sense that he has all the ability in the world, and it's really him versus his mind, in the sense that the place that got him to where he is that he's a real critic on his own performance. He's never satisfied because he's pushing himself to like the most insane places. So really, like in terms of competitively, if he just sails the way he sails, it's like unbelievable. So
I guess it's a little different than surfing too, though, right? Because surfing, you're waiting and there's a lot of jockeying to just catch the wave. And windsurfing, there's kind of almost a natural rotation that can occur. I mean, you can still like be tactical on people, but like not the same with surfing. So maybe you can just sort of avoid that. And he can go on a half the size wave and do twice as big of a trick as anyone and maybe just equal the score. So he's not even looking for the most perfect wave.
But maybe he's trying to capture that free sailing magic and packaging it, because like even John sometimes what I've noticed, he'll give away the first set wave, or he won't fight for that because it's not really in his frame of thinking of how he would approach a session. And maybe that's like, but throughout the heat, he would definitely make calls that were critical in terms of competitively. But totally. I feel like that free flowing state of mind that allows that magic to happen is you can kind of stifle that if you get into that mindset where like maybe you watch Medina where that fire is fueled off of that. Like
there's different approaches for sure, right? And when it's funny, right, Ridge, this, John Florence, he comes across as the most relaxed, like, oh, all good, dude. And maybe this is the same thing with Brasinho, but he's so competitive to the point he would be fine never letting one of his brothers ever beat him at even a board game or a card game. Like, he won't stop until he absolutely doesn't beat you once, but beats you twice at something. Ridge, you played pool with them, and it was the exact scenario.
Yeah, we were on a trip in Kauai, and we were just like hanging out at the house, like, oh, let's play some pool, just whatever. I'm not that good at pool, but like, I think I had like one lucky game and I beat him, and it like tortured him for the whole trip. Like, he beat me like 10 times in a row. I'm like, okay, like I get it.
I get it.
You beat me. No, he's really sick though. It's like Kai said, it seems like he's all chill, but he is the most competitive person I think I've ever met.
And you ask Nathan about him and he's like, dude, John never let me win anything. He wouldn't even just like no sympathy. Like, he wants to destroy me constantly. And that's obviously like a brother competitiveness, but I just thought that was like, I was like, gosh, he's just so good at hiding it, isn't he?
I guess so. It fooled me. I don't really know him like you guys do, but there's a gentleman aspect to, like, he doesn't really like fight in the beginning of the heat.
For sure.
He
knows if he just stands up on a wave, he's gonna just annihilate anyone. He just needs the wave.
Exactly.
He's an interesting example though, because not to cut you off, Ridge, but he's an interesting example because I was trying to tell him, have you ever thought of picking up windsurfing, John? Because he's the best surfer in the world. He just won the world championship this year. but from 2 foot to 20 foot, he's one of the best, if not the best ever. And then he loves to go sail on his giant sailboat, his gunboat, and he sailed most of the Pacific. He has a foiling Phantom, which is a hydrofoil catamaran boat that is like 2-person. I've sailed it with him from Oahu to Kauai and back. And on that trip, the trip that Ridge is sort of describing before having competitive pool games, I was like, dude, you're really good at sailing and you're really good at surfing. You should try this sport called windsurfing. It's like right in between. And part of me was like, maybe I shouldn't be suggesting this because he'll become the best windsurfer on the face of the planet.
We already have to deal with you. We don't need another one of you.
Just imagine my average level at surfing.
Whatever.
And then imagine his world championship prowess. But he reads the wind unbelievably. And he's like, he did tell me, because I asked him too. I was like, okay, if all the wind sports, what would you want to learn? And I kind of was like, kiting's a little better for Oahu. You might want to do that. And he's like, oh no, if I'm going to learn windsurfing. And I was like, okay, sick. And
That'd be sick.
I keep poking him every so often. I'll be like, so when are you gonna come over and learn how to windsurf? Or I'll just go over there and show you on Oahu. And he's like, I think when he retires from winning world championships, which who knows how long he might be, he's top of the game, so why would he quit now? But I think when I think as soon as he discovers windsurfing, he's gonna be like, oh my gosh, it's two of my favorite things in one sport, and it'll be really fun to see what he could bring from surfing into windsurfing, as far as his John turns, and even his just aerial prowess of not ever using foot straps, but now having the stability to go for things that he would normally do surfing. So I hope he, comes around to the idea at one point.
I think back to the equipment and what you're doing with your shapes, and, you're basically trying to convert your windsurfing board into a surfboard in terms of the fin configuration and the outline of the board and what you want out of the sail and how you want to perform on the wave. I think that's going to be more in line with something that he's going to be able to feel and connect with. So I feel like what you're doing with your equipment, like watching this contest and watching what you're doing in terms of what everybody else is doing, it's a different mindset. It's a different approach to the sport in terms of the way your stance is, the way you're kind of approaching the lip. Everything is, you really are trying to, convert your surfing as much as possible into your windsurfing and complementing those two things. Where I think that takes that next step in gear evolution, that you personally are like passionate about making that connection. And I think windsurfing has that. I think it can be pushed where, it's not going to be the turns like John in the sense it's hard to get the gear to even go to those extent. But maybe it can get kind of close. Maybe, who knows?
Well, I think in windsurfing, what you can't do surfing, you can do other things that surfing you couldn't. You can hit a gurgling massive lip and you can float the whole section. And I think for me, it's like having done an extensive amount of surfing, my whole life, but really been trying to improve at it. Adopting, influence from surfing and bringing it back to windsurfing. It was always hard because if I went windsurfing, it would kind of affect my surfing because windsurfing's so front foot pressure while surfing's a lot more back footed pressure. And I found that, I could read the wave good on a windsurfer based off the things I learned surfing. But when I would go back to surfing, I would be used to the speed, but at the same time, I would be too front footed. And it was like a real struggle. And it was as soon as I started shaping my own boards and really just leveraged the windsurfing design or surfing designs into windsurfing and really just made a surfboard, put some straps on it and threw a windsurf sail on it, was when I realized that every time I windsurf now, my surfing's getting better, and every time I surf, my windsurfing's getting better. So it's that kind of symbiotic relationship between the two that now it doesn't feel like one is taking away from the other. Not that it ever really did. It just now surfing, riding a wave a particular way is almost the same every time. It just doesn't, the equipment might be a little different. Like I have a sail on my board this time, or the board's a little bigger. And when I go surfing, it's, a smaller board, but I find that, I'm just scratching the surface, and thank goodness for Quattro and Keith Tabul, who like all of a sudden see this vision, and, we're going to continue to work on ways to develop the equipment to get closer to surfing while still keeping the best elements of windsurfing. And it's a search for, a new feeling. Like the board is, it's funny because I did try a board that, the world champion Brazinho developed with Goya, and then I rode mine, which was nothing was taken from windsurfing. I started from scratch, and I basically just tried to shape a big shortboard. And when I went out there, they were both trying to achieve the same thing, which I thought was hilarious because we approached it completely different. My wide point's a lot farther back. The rocker's more traditional surf rocker, so it's really, curved in the middle. Yeah. It's a really pointed nose. It's a much wider tail. It's a very flat deck. Everything is the opposite of Brazinho's. The fins are asymmetrical. They're not 50-50 profile, so they're not maybe as fast. But then he has, and my board is a single concave, the whole thing. He had a board that's V, wide point forward, full nose, narrow small tail, super dome deck to give you that roll, and then a much narrower stance and different fins. And I rode them, and I was like, they're almost the same, but they're not. Like, I still get stuff that I want a little bit more through my board, but it was funny how you could get at one place from two completely different directions, and that's what I mean by you have to really find what works good for you, because I don't know if Brazinho would actually like my board, because he sails very differently to myself, but it's just interesting.
Levi, did you try Kai's shape yet?
Yeah, I tried it. It was a kind of a funky day. I was actually coaching that day, so I didn't really have a lot of time, but I could feel like it was just felt completely different than what Kai was explaining, like in terms of it felt like everything was really under your feet. The wide point was back, the tail was a little wider, and it felt more compact where you're turning more off of the stance. You're not necessarily using the full profile of the board, where windsurfing, you kind of, a traditional board, it really starts to perform as you get it up to speed better, because you have a lot of lift, and if there's too much drag, you'll feel that in windsurfing. But where Kai's board, it felt like it could perform at a slower speed really well because everything was compact under your feet, and you have the surfing fins are super loose. So it's just kind of two different worlds.
I could see that. Like when I was watching the contest, it was on Friday, that really good day. It was like so apparent that board, it looked like it was almost trippy to see. It looked so similar to surfing, but Kai, you would do these like really powerful turns in the airs, and it's funny is I think it like really resonated with like the surfers around here. Like every time, all of my friends that surf, they're like, "Oh, how was Kai's heat?" Or even they were watching your heat too, Levi, and like raving about it. And I was like, "Oh, it's pretty sick to see like the surfers into it." But I think they really appreciate your guys' sailing in general, because you're from here, you both insane surfers too, and you really approach the wave like a surfer would, versus like we're watching some of the other guys that maybe aren't so used to surfing and riding waves like that, and it's like it doesn't resonate with like the surfing crowd as much, which I thought that was really interesting. But it was really cool to see everyone's really hyped to watch you guys, so it's gonna be sick. What is it finals day tomorrow?
I think so, yeah.
I think everyone on Maui is going to be tuning in. It's going to be a big one.
Yeah,
I know, and the live feed this year is just out of control because, they have this amazing drone pilots just flying the drones so close. And sailing, windsurfing, right? It's so consistent. It's just like you can keep the drone on one guy and they can like ride a ton of waves in like 2 minutes. And the difference between surfing and windsurfing is the heats are like half the time typically. We might have like, you've had a 5-minute heat, haven't you, before, Levi? Like in some of these other places. 5 minutes sounds insane, but it's so windy. You're moving around. You're like,
well, when we first started competing, it was like we were doing 8-minute heats with 2-minute transitions with 3 waves and 2 jumps.
You're just like, how do you do all that in that amount of time?
I was just like, and I'm like, I could not. And I'm like, those guys, they're like 10 years older than me, and they had that thing wired. They knew that formula. I just couldn't wrap my head around it. I just felt like it was trying to like package something into such a short space of time.
I think you won the Aloha Classic, right, in 2013. Was when you finally won it, and everyone was just over the moon because you did it, and you're probably due for another one, to be honest, because you're pretty much the best sailor there on any given day. But besides the Aloha Classic and that event, would you say that first year you guys went to this mythical land called Cabo Verde, to this island called Sol, to this crazy windsurf event that's like literally on the rocks, and it's like the biggest, cleanest, most perfect windsurf waves anyone had ever seen. No one had seen it up to that point, really. And you guys were boosting like 30 feet above a 20-foot wave, so you were almost 50 feet above sea level. Tell us about that, because that was like some of the most legendary wave sailing still to this day I think I've ever seen.
It's interesting that you mentioned that. There's been tons of Aloha Classics, and it's blurry in the mind. You after a winter or two, you start to forget about them. But that event, it's like etched in my brain. Like the 2007 Cape Verde event will always be etched in my brain. I still get visions of that event because the conditions were incredible. Like the most pumping, right-handing, point break, barreling, tons of wind, and it was just weeks of conditions like that. I've never seen a forecast show up for an event, and it just like there's like this weird contagion going through all the riders where everybody just got on this path where they're like, let's just see how huge we can go. It went from like, it'd be cool to win this contest, but it'd be really cool to win the contest if I went 30 feet off the lip.
Yeah, you guys had like a couple second hang time. You were like floating.
And it was just like one guy was doing it, and then it turned into like this rad just expression session in the contest. It was just.
And if you fell on that wave, you're on the rocks immediately, right?
Oh yeah,
it's
we
like,
were getting completely smashed, like completely.
No one left with gear.
No, I remember I did a heat, and I tried to hit this lip that was almost unmakeable. I got completely annihilated. I got washed up on the rocks. I got my other gear. I sailed back out, and I was bottom turning, and my broken rig was floating on the wave, and I had to bottom turn around it.
No, you didn't. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's some core wave sailing competition right there.
Was that the sessions that were in the Windsurfing Movie 1?
Yeah, the Windsurfing Movie 1.
That was so
oh my
sick.
gosh, those
I'll
aerials
play
are...
all those clips. That was some of the most that movie in general. We should touch on that. That movie.
I mean, we have to touch on.
I don't feel like I've even done an error even close to that. Like I don't even know if the new boards can even do that.
They're too slow, I think. Now.
They're too slow. They're too wide, and there's too much volume. Those boards were just.
Tell us how the difference between now and then.
Well, I mean, that was like a pivotal event because it was like the maximum performance on single fins with thinner volume, longer, narrower.
Well, what were the lengths? Was it like 8 foot?
Oh yeah, it was like a short board at that time was like 7'10", 7'9".
And now they're 7'3", right?
Yeah.
Like
so and like Josh was, I'm sure, riding an 8'2". So that was but that's what was allowing those psycho aerials. Yeah, because we were knifing.
Now people ride quads or tri-fin.
Well, that's going back into the Cowley effect in that particular event, is because everybody was attacking the performance on above the lip, but what Cowley was doing is, I wouldn't say he had the hugest aerials, but how loose and how agile he was in the pocket. The lines he was taking on, I think he was riding a twin fin with a shorter board. He was riding a really short board, really compact, and he was riding really just tight in the pocket. And it was so different than everybody else that it just gave like a huge contrast in riding style. So that it was like almost like the climax of an era and the beginning of a new era all in one contest.
That's a good point. Actually, yeah, because he made it all the way to the finals against Josh Angulo, and there wasn't a bigger difference between the two than in that moment, because Josh was riding probably like a 5'3" square meter sail. Cowley was probably like on a 4'6" or something. Cowley was probably on a 76 liter board, twin fin,
and they were
7
well
feet
matched.
long. Yeah, and they were like going toe to toe.
Yeah, they were like this. Like Cowley is mentally tough. Josh is mentally tough, and they were just like dish, dish. And
Two
Josh,
different approaches, right?
two different approaches on the wave, two different lines, and it was very controversial. Like the outcome in terms of, I personally think no one knows that wave better than Josh Angulo. He never
found
misses
that place, basically.
he never misses a lip. He knows his timing is impeccable, flawless. Like
And his aerials, he somehow always ties in these beautiful, lofty, huge aerials with like a great transition turn. And, with the boards he's riding, limited to what he could do, but he'd do these beautiful sweeping turns and go straight back up and punt 15 feet again.
It's still sick. You watch that footage now and it's almost refreshing. His sailing looks like
full circle.
It looks refreshing to see it again. The way that he could time the lip. I think what always blew my mind is how well, if he wasn't right on the section, like if he come off a big hit and the lip wasn't set up, he would like delay his bottom turn and stall for a second and let the thing build up and just right in the money hit and just boom, tag it again. He just knew the sections.
This makes me want to go back to Cape Verde.
That place just looks so sick.
Oh my gosh.
And then for people that don't know windsurfing, I think the best introduction ever is the movie you guys put together, the Windsurfing Movie. There's 2 of them. But the climax of that film is that contest you were just talking about. And it's such a well put together story that you guys did for those movies. Like better than pretty much any other water sports movie I've ever seen. Like
it's one of the best movies
to this day.
ever.
It's so good. Even if you don't windsurf, you don't know anything about windsurfing, like it'll make a fan out of you for sure.
And the music too was insane.
So
you guys
good.
had the Rolling Stones in there.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that kind of goes back to where there was a misperception, or people didn't really perceive windsurfing in the mainstream. They kind of was stuck in the 80s. And at that time, I had this like, and I know Johnny, it was just the right time. And for me, I was really passionate about showing windsurfing to the mainstream world in the light that how skating and snowboarding and all of that, like the storytelling and the imagery and the music. And I remember I was like, we got to just make the most mental windsurfing video we could possibly make. Like, what does even that look like? What would you even do? You have to communicate.
Unique.
You have to communicate the whole sport to an audience that don't even know anything about it. You have to tell the history about it. You have to show where we came from, like who we are, what we're about, and like show the evolution of where it is, the modern day.
That film, I got to be a part of it as like a little kid, and that was super special. And I was maybe at the time a little bummed that I was like, we're the Kids of America song. But now looking back, it was so perfect, and it fit the film great, and I was just honored to be a part of it. And it's like, to be a part of that sort of history is like, it's very humbling and grounding. But what changed, I'd say, totally changed my entire life when I was like 12 years old was when you guys dropped the first trailer, and it was to the Led Zeppelin song Over the Hills and Far Away. And just with the interview with Robbie, and then you guys were filming with the helicopter and doing these Matrix style shots, and it was so cinematic. There hasn't even been a sports surf style film, like water sports, board sport film that even touched that trailer. And it doesn't exist online. We're gonna have to like call Johnny, or I don't know if you even have it on some hard drive.
I might have one. I'll have to like dig up under some clothes.
It was the first one you guys put up,
closet.
and it had like the wind chimes going, and Robbie was talking about the colors. He perfectly described windsurfing, and I just wish I could show that single trailer to people, because that perfectly tells the story of like how amazing, colorful, and powerful windsurfing was. And I still like daydream about that, and I haven't even seen it for years. I can't listen to that Led Zeppelin song without just playing that trailer in my head.
Yeah, that was it. And it's a lot of that came from snowboarding, like those helicopter shots. We were taking pages out of their book, because at that time they were doing the rapping heli before drones. They were doing the Matrix. We call it the Matrix shot, and that's like as the rider's rotating, the helicopter's rotating around the rider. And it's just, you shoot it at that was something I really wanted, was I wanted 16 millimeter film with Johnny. I'm like, we have to,
It hasn't aged at all. That's
Yeah,
the
it's
crazy
like we
thing. Is
wanted-
it looks like it was shot on red.
Yeah, and it just has that cinematic feel. It's like, we have to shoot this on 16 millimeter, which was, I don't know if you
That's
remember,
insane,
yeah, what a headache.
You had to make the trick.
Oh.
You couldn't fall.
It's I don't think I would ever want to go back to that process of what that is, but it's
Now we have red cameras and you can just go all day.
yeah, but I think it was the audience now is different. Like, we've all changed. Like, movies, they don't have the level of appreciation in the sense that you would wait a whole year in anticipation for this amazing. There was no social media, and it was like you just soak it up like a sponge. It was like it was enough inspiration to last you for a whole year after. Where now it's like we're so inundated with media
Too much media.
it's hard to really even get, no matter how well you'd make a film, it's really hard to capture that magic because the audience has changed.
True. Never thought
For
of
sure.
it really like that. I just miss those sick movie premieres where everyone would just show up and there was all this energy and all you wanted to do was go in the water the next day. And gosh, I mean, it was pretty sick because you tapped into one of the most legendary ski filmmakers, which was Johnny DeCesare. He's kind of a lord in the ski world, and he was the counterculture of skiing. He wasn't the race down the hill type. He was like baggy clothes, do freestyle, and kind of like anti-establishment, which is funny because Johnny, if you've ever met Johnny, is the nicest human on the face of the planet.
Yeah.
And
He's
just
so
wants to have fun.
classic.
He's a kid,
He's a big kid.
that's like, he's just a big kid.
Yeah. He's awesome.
And he changed the sport forever. I think he really actually influenced other, parts of water sports with that film, because after that, surfing started changing a little bit. And, I think people were seeing it outside of windsurfing. And, it's amazing that you were able to like link up with him and then also tap into Jace Pontebianco, who is like, a windsurfing professional, but moving into water cinematography. And between you three and then the amazing editors that were involved, like Cody Carter and many others, there was just like,
Chris Austin.
everything just came together,
Dave
and then
Levin.
Dave Levin, and then,
Chris Austin.
the storylines that existed in windsurfing that hadn't been told just made for this psycho film. And the windsurfing movie too holds up on its own too. It was like a different feeling, and you guys didn't have to like recreate the lightning in the bottle because you just made something almost completely different. It felt more Endless Summer type.
Yeah, well, I think we were more polished as movie makers, I think, but it's hard to get the original, like the original feeling of when you go through the history of the sport and you build the foundation for that film. And it was really interesting because we learned that when you set out to make a film, a lot of people have a script or a guideline and they want to execute that. And I think that is important, but sometimes the best story is so close that you can't even see it because it's too close to you. It's it's right in front of you, and it's actually happening in real time. So for instance, like when we broke down in Morocco and we almost missed the event, and that was no plan on being in the video at all. Just like what happened at the time. And then we show up just in time, and that stuff, just kind of the candidness of that.
We got to
really
rewatch that film. That movie's a 10 out of 10.
It really like makes you realize, like, just watching those movies again, that like I truly think windsurfing is the most underrated water sport ever. It does not get the credit it deserves nowadays. No. It's so high octane. Like it's almost unbelievable. Like, especially if you have a surfer mindset and you're used to seeing like, oh man, he flew 2 feet above the lip and did a full rotation. It's like windsurfers are going 20 feet above the lip and going upside down. It's pretty insane. And I hope if there's one takeaway from this episode that non-windsurfers have is like, check this sport out because it is wildly entertaining, and look at Levi Cyber videos. It'll be some of the best windsurfing you see for sure.
For sure. I mean, windsurfers were the ones to ride the biggest waves on Earth out at Jaws at that time. Without windsurfing, tow windsurfing wouldn't exist, and places like Nazare would still probably be left untouched. And maybe eventually people would catch on to using machines to tow in, but it was windsurfing that broke the mold and introduced foot straps. So, you know, windsurfing's had just the most insane influence across so many water sports that we love to do today.
And I think that, you know, Kai, you've really taken from where I've been in the sport, but you've taken it to another level in terms of like the audience and showing it like your style to this whole surf world. And I feel like windsurfing has, you know, been broadcasted to people that have never seen the progressive side of it. So like you're carrying that torch. You're the next generation of you know, progressing it to a bigger platform. I feel like the story is not written yet. I think the potential for windsurfing to get really big again is right there, because it's so much fun and it's so addicting, and it's just something that you could have for your whole life. You can do it, and like look at Robbie, he's in his 60s and he's still just ripping. So
I keep trying to tell him, I'm like, dude, you just got to make Rip 2 already. Like people want it. Like so you only live once. Like it's not like, oh, he's in his 60s and you couldn't watch it. Like guy's still doing push tabletops and hitting the biggest lips at Hookipa and just shredding, blowing tail. And I'm like, just come on, Rip 2. We all want to see it. Even if you just recreate Rip 1. Like
such a good movie.
Such a good movie. It's just so legendary. He's just, he's the OG. So, yeah, I don't know.
Is that where you got your Taco Bell? Is that where your Taco Bell habit came from?
I'd say a lot of who I become was heavily influenced by Robbie Naish. I mean, he was just one of my heroes, mentor, and you know, he probably really he made Taco Bell as cool as it is today. You know, like you watching that Rip movie and he goes through Taco Bell and he's like, the lunch of champions. Taco Bell.
It made it seem. I just was rewatching it because we were pulling some clips for one of the last episodes, and dude, it was so sick that whole sequence. I was like, that I could pinpoint. That's why we love Taco Bell. You made it like you said, you made it seem so cool.
And big trucks. Trucks.
Maybe I need to go get some Taco Bell tomorrow, because Kai, you eat Taco Bell, Robbie eats Taco Bell. What's going on?
I have some for in between heats, honestly. I have 3 burritos in the fridge. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to just go big.
That's magic, man. So classic.
Well, I feel like we haven't even tapped into what the stories of windsurfing, the other places, because like, you know, just to briefly go there, I mean, windsurfing, the cool thing is it brought me to places I never, you know, no normal surfer would ever go. I mean, think about in the middle of Oregon on a river, and you have like the Columbia River Gorge, you know, Hood River in particular, where you know, were brought up at a young age, and you get 50 knot winds and borderline mast high swell in a river.
Yeah.
You know, there's like, windsurfing is crazy. Like, it's totally nuts.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it's you never feel like you graduate from it. It's something that it's like you're always pursuing it, trying to get better, never completely satisfied with where you are.
I think it's probably one of the ultimate forms of sailing, because here you have the most simple, it's the quickest way, easiest way to go sail. And it can cover any condition the world has to offer. There's nothing you can't windsurf, to be honest. And it's been proven time and time again with the storm chases, the biggest waves ever ridden, the crossing the Atlantic Ocean, and then even just wave sailing some of the heaviest waves on Earth. So, you know, it's the spectrum of the sport is just wild. And, you know, there's more than one discipline. You can wave ride, you can freestyle, you can race, you can ride foils with windsurfers. It's just
so amazing.
There's really not enough time in the day to do it all.
Well, you're doing a pretty good job at it, Kai.
I'm stressing over it. I lose sleep over not doing enough of it.
I don't know how, man, you do. There's nothing that you don't do. I mean, I even think you boogie board. Don't you boogie board pretty good too? Like you do everything.
Know what? I really want to get good at bodyboarding for sure. That's on a bucket list. I want to get really gnarly at bodyboarding, because it just they make it look fun.
Those like huge barrel rolls.
You guys are psycho.
Pipe.
Oh, I just think about my lower back every time those guys land, because they go like as big as we do windsurfing, and they land on the flats on their stomachs. And I'm like,
gnarly.
Maybe I'll stick to standing on boards, you know? Like, it's a little, maybe that's where I draw the line. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's wild. Well, I'm just honored to be part of this with you guys, watching you guys grow up and the athletes that you've become. It's amazing. The talent and how much you inspire all the other young guys in Hawaii. And Ridge, seeing you like push at Jaws, like my mind's blown, like how deep you're going, catching the bombs and pulling in, and it's definitely inspiring. You guys are inspiring me to stay on it and try to be young.
Yeah, we can't wait to tow you into some bombs this year.
I'm due. I got to get barreled. I've only thought I've been barreled, and then I saw the video and I'm like, that's not a barrel. So I'm
Quick
due.
honorable mention to our boy Adam from Poland, who almost got barreled on a 70-footer at Jaws windsurfing.
Yeah, man.
He just pulled in. Maybe I don't know if he would have made it, but I don't know. That was as close as anyone's ever going to get to getting barreled on a windsurfer.
That was
God blessed him. He didn't die somehow.
He didn't die. He said he didn't even get a breath of air. He said he didn't even have a life, or he didn't even pull his jacket.
He just popped up fine.
I don't know. There's just a lot of mystery around how he survived that, but he did.
He came up totally fine. I swear, if he still had windsurf gear, because he sailed up from like a mile away. He had Cape Bay. He sailed like upwind and then ended up on someone's boat. And had he had other gear, I swear he would have gone straight back out and tried it again.
That was windsurfing's version of Point Break, when Bodie just goes out and dies.
Oh my gosh, that was of that day the heaviest wave ridden by far.
That was the worst wipeout I've ever seen in windsurfing.
That was maybe the worst wipeout I've ever seen anyone have. Like, who falls? Who can handle falling right there? Like,
and there's a guy, and there was a guy in the lip going over the falls.
That's what I'm saying.
Dude, that was the most intense thing anyone's ever seen.
That guy.
No, I don't even like to watch it anymore. I don't even like to.
It's too gnarly.
Oh my
it's
gosh.
too gnarly.
It gives you anxiety.
It's like now knowing that they both made it out okay you could like kind of laugh at it, but dude, in the moment, everybody thought they died. Like
the guy
it was really gnarly.
I think his name is Raphael. He's actually a gnarly, like, he can hold his breath for 10 minutes. The guy's like tapped, but he was trying to save his tow board, and he was like in the lip going over the falls, held the tow board. I think he might have gone into shock underwater, because from what I heard, he held onto the board and he only popped up at the rocks, and he never pulled his vest. And a board's going to float better than you because of all that foam. But, I was just like, what? It makes you rethink what's possible. Like, have I just been a wuss this whole time? Because, like, they fell on a 70-foot wave and they were completely fine. Like, what is going on?
Well, they're definitely pretty durable, those two.
Yeah, they're built different for sure. Polish, and go figure. These guys are tapped.
Crazy. Well, right on. Well, thanks, Levi, for coming on here, our first guest. That was sick.
Honored. Thank you guys for having me. That was fun.